Today's reading is Unit 1, Lesson 3, Exploration 2, pages 56 through 60. Title of the exploration is Inferring Evolutionary Relationships Among Organisms. Data from fossils help scientists to make inferences about extinct organisms. For example, data from fossils can be used to infer the sizes of living things, their lifespans, what they ate, and how they moved. As new fossils are found, new observations are used to support, modify, or correct earlier ideas. Understanding how living things have changed over time is an ongoing process. New information adds to what scientists understand about evolutionary processes. So looking at do the math, scientists have found fossils of the various growth stages of many extinct species, including the Tyrannosaurus rex, or T-Rex for short. Observation from these fossils are used to infer how extinct species grew. So when the different ages of T-Rex fossils were first found, it was thought that they were different species because they look so different. The data used to plot the graph was collected from the fossils of 7 individual T-Rexes, or T-Rex fossils. These are the data points in the graph. So they have the different types of T-Rexes, the different ages of development. So like this would have been a really, really young or like a baby T-Rex. This would have been like a juvenile or like a teenager. And then this one would be an adult. And then this is showing the growth curve of that from birth to adulthood of the T-Rex. So question 15, imagine you are a scientist studying 2 different T-Rex fossils. Observation from one fossil suggests it is from a T-Rex with a body mass of about 2,000 kilograms. The other fossil is from a T-Rex with a body mass of about 3,500 kilograms. Based on the growth curve data, what is the age difference between these 2 fossil dinosaurs? And why can you assume the larger T-Rex is more mature, not just bigger? Defend your answer using evidence from the graph. Well, if you would look at the graph, and it's kind of hard to see on my page, but you're going to look for the mass on this side, and this would tell you the age in years. So at 2,000, your T-Rex is going to be about 15 years old. That's that point right there. So 2,000 pounds, or kilograms, not pounds, would be 15 years old. And then at 3,500, which is about here, your T-Rex is going to be about 18 years old. So they're not super distant in age, but they are different. So they're about 3 years apart in age. The graph shows that, mass increases with age. Like T-Rexes don't necessarily come in bigger sizes like they do. Like, especially as adults, you can get different sizes. But as they're growing, they're usually not super, super different from each other. They kind of grow at the same rate. All T-Rexes do. So because it's larger and because of what the information that the graph tells us, they're more likely different in age and not different in size because one is bigger than the other. So looking on page 57 is the lab. We are skipping this lab. So you can turn the page. On page 58, relationships among fossil organisms and living organisms. Body structures and other features of fossilized organisms may be similar to features present in modern organisms. In general, the more recently the fossilized organism lived, the more similar its body structures are to modern living organisms. Similarities and differences in anatomy are used to make inferences about evolutionary relationships among living and extinct organisms. Scientists revise and refine their understanding of evolutionary relationships as new evidence is found. Case study, evolution of elephants. So modern elephants belong to a group of mammals that includes extinct animals such as the mammoth and the mastodon. Until recently, there were only 2 genuses of living elephants recognized, the African elephant and the Asian elephant. Scientists closely compared the anatomy and DNA of these elephants. This evidence suggests that there are actually 2 different species of African elephant, the savanna elephant and the forest elephant. Scientists have used both anatomical data and DNA analysis to make inferences about how modern elephants are related to extinct relatives. For example, scientists use tooth shape to study relatedness among elephants and their ancestors. Modern elephants have flat, ridged teeth to grind up the tough plants they eat. Like elephants, mammoths, and mastodons were herbivores. They had teeth that helped them to chew their food well. So, you have the different structures. So this yellow one, the cell flag, is an Asian elephant tooth. The flat surface would help to grind up grasses and shrubs. So here you can see the flat surface. This red flag is an African elephant tooth. The diamond-shaped ridges help to grind up tree branches and bushes. The blue flag is a mammoth tooth. Food particles caught in the mammoth's teeth can help scientists tell what it ate. but it would have ate something similar to these Asian elephants because their teeth structure is very the same. They have these ridges, but they're not really, the ridges aren't really pointed, they're smooth. So they would have eaten more like grasses and shrubs. And then the green is the mastodon. The wavy ridges in the mastodon tooth are very different from the mammoth tooth, but if you look at the African elephant and the mastodon, they do have similarities. These ridges are more pronounced, but they both have like pointed ridges, which means that they would have mostly eaten like tree branches and bushes, so things that were a little harder and tougher to chew, and they would have needed pointier ridges to be able to grind that food up so they could swallow it. So 16 is looking at the structure of the 4 different animals based on the structure of the teeth. Which extinct animal do you think was most closely related to the Asian elephant? And I already answered this. So the yellow and the blue flag is what they're looking at. So the yellow flag is your Asian elephant. The blue flag was the mammoth tooth. And so those two are going to be the most similar because they have the rounded ridges instead of the pointed ridges like the African elephant does. So then page 59. Elephant lineage. The relationships in this diagram were determined by examining the anatomy of modern animals and extinct animal fossils, as well as embryological and genetic data. So they have the different ages, the different periods of time, and then they show you how the elephant would have developed into the elephants that we have today, and then the different ancestors that have gone extinct. So this would have been a very, very distant relative of all elephants, which would eventually, so it was relatively tiny. It would eventually have gotten bigger and bigger, so this one probably would have maybe been the size of like a cow, maybe. And it got bigger and bigger, and then so at this point, this part branched off and created our stegodon and our mastodon. Both are extinct. This is when they went extinct, was in this era, or this period, I should say. And then further along, this guy turned into this guy. So not only did he branch off and turn into these two, but he also, part of the population turned into this guy. This guy would have developed into this animal here, the Deinotherium, or it would have developed into Primelephas. Primelephas would have developed into our African elephants, our Asian elephants, our mammoths, and our Anancus. And the Anancus and the mammoths are both extinct, while our Asian elephants and our African elephants are still alive. So, question 17. Question 17 says, scientists work to understand the evolutionary history of elephants. They look at embryological and anatomical data such as tooth structure. If we're talking about tooth structure, if we're talking about a structure of a body, we're looking at the anatomical data, not the embryological data. They infer that the Asian African elephants are most closely related to the mammoth because both animals have similar different tooth structures as well as other similarities. Well, we already determined it was the Asian elephant that is closely related to the mammoth because both animals have similar tooth structures. So then question 18, based on the diagram, which animal, extinct or alive, would you expect to have the most anatomical similarities to the mastodon? How long ago did this animal live? Explain your answer. So the mastodon shares a evolutionary branch with this stegodon. So the stegodon would be the closest relative because they shared a branch. The stegodon went extinct in the same period of time as well, which was about 2 million years ago. So turn the page. Okay, so to find a claim with evidence, the Ashfall fossil beds in northeast Nebraska contain many well-preserved fossils of ancient animals. The most common fossilized animal found there is the barren-bodied rhinoceros or rhino, Taloceros major. Fossils of 5 different species of horses are also found at the beds. About 12 million years ago, these animals all died and were buried in a volcanic ash. So the lines in this photo outline the bone structure of an extinct rhino and a horse that are found in the Ashfall fossil beds. It is possible to see some of the anatomical similarities between the fossilized rhino and the living rhino, and between the fossilized horse and the living horse. So here's your horse. I believe, yeah, that should be your horse. And this should be your rhino. And then this is the black rhinoceros, the Diceros bicorneus, which is our current species of rhino that is currently still living. It's on the endangered species list, but it's currently still living. And then the Przewalski horse, or Equus ferus. In this case, this one's scientific name is easier to pronounce than its common name. But this horse. So make a claim about which fossil A or B is the rhino and which fossil is the horse. Use anatomical evidence from the photos to defend your claim. So if we look at the structure, if you look at the rhino and how big it is, and you look at the horse and how tall it is, the rhino fossil should be this one because this fossil is wider. So it's going to be a thicker animal, not necessarily fat, but just thicker because the bone structure is thicker, but it wouldn't have been necessarily super tall. So this one looks more similar to this one. So A should be a rhino, whereas this one, way in the back, this one would have been taller just based on the limb structure, had a thinner head, so it's going to be taller, have a thinner head, and has a longer neck, which is what the horse has when compared to the rhino. So this B should be your horse relative. So you would compare the skulls of the living organisms with the skulls of the fossilized organisms, and then compare the body size. That would tell you which one was which. So today is also just continuing to get your evolutionary project done, or extinction project done. Your extinction project is due on the 7th.